a lot of people will then go something like, oh, well, I can't cut this scene even though it doesn't have my theme because I kill Bob in this scene. And it's so important for the story that Bob dies. And that's why I always push people to understand that things are elements. So just because you killed Bob in this scene and in this way doesn't mean you can't kill him in a different scene in a different way and still have the same exact impact that it needs to be on the story. So if you cannot work that theme in there, it must be cut. And anything that's in that scene that must happen for the story just either has to happen in a different scene that replaces it, or you have to move it to, a scene before to scene after, whatever you're going to do. Releasing your inner dragon.
So, Drake, can you have a story without a theme?
No. You have a series of events. You do not have a story. If you do not have a theme, you do not have a story. Period. End of discussion. There is no... Now, but here's the rub. If you write a story, it has a theme. It's just that if you didn't pay attention to it, if you don't know what you're doing, if you're just writing stuff, it's going to be a muddied, fuzzy ghost of a thing that probably is going to be some cliche good versus evil. But human beings can't tell stories to each other. You can't tell me what happened to you at work today without it having a theme in it. Like it's going to, because that's what communication is, of things that happen. We're going to say things that happen because it's going to have something about it that is evoking to the human equation.
And on the topic of not having a theme and having a theme, like if you try and write, like if you have something without a theme, or you think you don't have a theme or whatever, you probably do have a theme, but it's a theme that you didn't choose.
Right.
So it's an unintended theme that might say something that you really didn't plan on saying. It just accidentally is in your work, and when somebody points it out, you're like, no, but I wasn't saying that. And it's like, yeah, but it's too late now.
Yeah. And that's why I say in the writer's room all the time, we as the writers do not get to decide if we're successful. And that includes on our theme. So if we're like, oh yeah, you're really, this is a message about, murder being wrong, and you're like, what are you talking about? It's a story about how it's justified to murder in this situation. And it's like, that's not what I got. And since it's all feels, the person is always right. What you look for then is it just that one person that feels that, or does 6 out of 10 feel that, or 7 out of 10 or whatever? Because then at that point you're just wrong, because now it has to go off of stats.
Yeah, and I do want to, I guess, emphasize here that whatever theme you put in your book, bear in mind that your reader comes with their own baggage. They come with their life, and they read your book with their baggage and their life. And the themes that they might see in it might be colored completely by their experience. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question isn't one reader feeling that, your theme endorses slavery, for example, like, to go for like something that might happen to you. Or that your theme endorses murder, something like that. It's not one reader feeling like that. It's when 80% of the readers that you sent it to for beta reading think that is what your book, the message of your book is. That's when you've included a theme that you didn't intend to include, and you should go look at where readers got this impression.
Yeah, every episode, but yeah, we discussed that last night in the writer's room. Like every episode, I say that. I was going to say, so yeah, that's the thing. And just as a quick example of that, let's look at a very simple story that almost everybody knows, and that's the Pied Piper. So the Pied Piper is a very old tale. It's about a village that's overrun by rats. This guy comes in, this freaky dude with a flute comes in and says, hey, I'm a magic dude and I can get rid of all your rats. You just got to pay me money. And they're like, yes, please do it. And so he plays his magic flute. He leads all the rats to the ocean. He drowns them. And he comes back and he's like, here, I want my money. And they're like, we're not paying you. You're just some weird dude with a flute. And so he plays his magic flute and he leads all their children to the ocean and he drowns them.
Mm.
And some people will go, oh, that message is about the perils of greed. The villages were greedy. Other people might go, oh, that story is about keeping your promises. It has nothing to do with greed. It has to do with you promise something, you should fulfill that promise. Both are right. Because again, it's how the story affects you as an individual. And then for me, if I write that, if I'm the one who writes that story, and this is what even if I got 50-50, even if it was 50% are like it's about greed, 50% about making promises, I can sit there and go, yeah, okay, I'm good with both of those. Like, I don't care which way you go on that, because both of them are giving you in the general ballpark of what I'm trying to convey with this story.
Right.
It's when you have something like, oh yeah, no,
Now,
you're justifying murder. It's like, what? No, no, no. I'm
yeah, let's
showing
say
murder's
that
bad.
80% of people are saying, oh, well, what you're actually saying here is that when the Pied Piper took those kids and drowned them, you're saying it's okay for a debt collector to go take people's children when they owe money and drown them in the ocean to force them to pay their debts. This is legit. And if 80% of people think that's your theme, now look, I'm not judging. Maybe that is your theme. Maybe you do approve of, I don't know. There are people out there. I understand. I don't personally approve of it, but if that's your bag, okay. Anyway, but if
Yeah,
that is not your intended theme, maybe go take a look at how you portray certain actions.
I have been using that little Pied Piper thing for 20 years when I'm teaching that one thing, and you just added to it. I will 100% be using that from here on out. That is funny as hell. But yeah, that's exactly it. If that's what the vast majority, even it's not even the vast majority. If 10%, if 20%, maybe if it's that extreme, you're like, whoa, I don't even want 10% thinking that. What line did I write? What paragraph? What scene? Like, what was in there? And they're like, oh, it was this right here. And like, okay, I can change that. Like, I can definitely change that. So, even though we were saying earlier 80% or whatever, it really depends on what you're trying to do. Uh, and if, I read something last night as an exercise to kind of show them internal emotions, and it's a very, very touching, sad scene, and talking about foreshadowing and subtext and uh, what the reader is getting internally from the character versus the external does not match it in any way, shape, or form. They're completely two different conversations. And so I used it for all that. And I can't remember exactly what it was. I made notes of it so I can go back and look at it because it is my current work in progress. But somebody said, this made me feel this way. And I'm like, all right, let me think about that a little bit. Now they were the only one, but still, if one person feels something, it's not that hard to take a look at it. And if I could
Hmm.
tweak it in a way that still does what I want to, because it's one or two lines. And so I mark it, and then I can go back and I go, okay, all right, okay, I understand. Yeah, it might make 10% of the people. Now, do I want to leave it because I'm fine with that? Or do I want to go, you know what? No, I can just tweak this, right? I can change this one word, change this one turn of phrase, and bam, now those 10% aren't gonna get lost going down this rabbit hole that I don't want them to go down. So it's not just, I mean, these are all, and also it's subjective. That's the other thing you have to keep in mind.
Like, I'll give you an example. So when I was working on the Ducal Heir, which is book 2 of Sangwheel, I had a scene in there, and I did not think that this was a serious issue at all, right? Because I had a scene in there where a mage gets hurt because of something that the main character does by accident, and there's a whole like process of her basically needing to recover and so on. And one of my beta readers came back and said, listen, this makes me feel super uncomfortable. It feels like a violation of this mage by the main character, which is then just brushed over. Like it's not handled by the story at all. And so, and it's because it specifically affected her magic, not just her, like she wasn't just hurt. And I took another look at it and I was like, actually, I don't need her magic to be hurt at this point. I was doing it for the MC's sake, not for this, not, and I don't really need it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing was I wasn't giving that incident sufficient gravitas. Right? I was just basically brushing it over because I needed it to be brushed over. And it is always like, even if it's just one reader, and even if you're like, that feels like an overreaction, it is worth going to see if that actually is an overreaction. Like maybe it is an overreaction because of the baggage of that reader, you know. If a reader comes with certain baggage, they will overreact to certain things. But it's still worth looking. What?
I have weird friends.
Okay.
Somebody updated their status on my Discord, one of my people, to currently eating the free Planned Parenthood condoms.
Okay. But yeah, so
Sorry, it was just weird.
yeah.
Got that.
Yeah. So yeah. In my opinion, you should always, like, if a beta reader comes back with this felt like X, even if you're like feels like an overreaction, it's worth going to look at it again.
Especially considering most things are a turn of phrase.
Hmm.
So they're so simple to adjust. You know, we're putting in these things and then we think that it's going to impact readers one way, and it actually, we find out it impacts them a different way. And then just a little tweak of a turn of phrase makes everything different. And it's just not that hard to do that. And it's also why I say all the time, we as writers do not get to decide if we were successful, if what we wrote works. Only readers get to decide if what we wrote works, and we need to listen to them. Another thing that happened to me this week in a different writers group. So I read, it was actually the same thing I read last night. Actually, this was last week, but the same thing I read last night, but I had read it earlier. And there were 3 guys and 3 girls in the room that were participating. And there's a scene where this woman is very stoic. Now she's a tertiary character, but she's the main character's wife, and she's very stoic. And this is an incredibly sad scene, an incredibly hard moment for her. And she's basically condemning her husband to die because it's the only chance that she has to save her child's life. But she loves them both, obviously, tremendously. And so she's saying goodbye without saying goodbye. And it's a very tough moment for her, but she is going to weather through it. And when she says her piece, she's got tears in her eyes, but she's not going to cry in front of it. You know, they're kind of in a public situation. And so she's going to turn around and walk stiff-backed into the house. And I thought it was fine. You know, I thought, yes, she's a strong woman. This is what she's going to do. Everybody knows that once she gets alone in her bedroom, she's going to cry her eyes out, but she's not going to do that here. And so I was good with it. All 3 women in the group were like, she has to falter. When she's walking away, her knees have to go weak. She has to shudder with a sob. She has to do, I'm like, you want me to make her weaker? And they're like, yes, you must do this. I didn't agree. In any way, shape, or form, I didn't agree.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, okay, help me understand why you need this. Because they were all 3 of them were like adamant. I've never, like, one of them even commented later, she was like, I have never gone after something in your writing like that. Like, pretty much everything you write, I read and I go, yeah, that's good. And she's like, but I did tear after you on this. And I'm like, explain to me why you need this, because I don't understand. And so I had them do that and really kind of let me see this moment through their eyes so that I could understand what they're looking for. Because again, 70% of my readers are female. So if I've got 100% of females in this room telling me to do something, I'm an idiot if I don't do it. Like, or at least go down the path. And then it's like, okay, now I kind of understand what you're wanting. I understand why you need it as a reader, but I can't see any way to do that. It breaks her character if she just falters. She wouldn't do that. And so now the room is throwing out ideas and we're tossing, oh, what if this happens? And what if that happens? What if this happens? And finally someone said something that led me down a path that let me figure out something to do. And, you know, in the final version, the child's window is above where they're at outside in the courtyard. And he's dying of a, it's basically like a magical tuberculosis that's uncurable. So he's got maybe a year to live, and it's a very painful, very suffering existence that he's living right now, and it's heartbreaking. So I actually, he's
Mm,
still asleep, but I have him cough in his sleep as she's walking away. And so
yeah.
them, the husband and wife hearing their child suffering right after this moment of, this really heavy exchange, I have her miss a step
Mm,
because not because of saying goodbye to her husband and being strong for him and like, you're going to go take care of this. And I'm going to show you that I'm strong on my side, and I'm going to let you do this. But now the child that is interrupting them basically, even though he's not awake or anything like that.
yeah.
And that I think does fit her character, that's just too much. It's just
Mm.
too much for her at that moment to be reminded of, what's at stake here.
So I'm with you, and often theme is in those smaller actions, but it's also often in the larger actions. Like one of the Peanut Gallery made the comment in there that regarding the story that I told of the ducal
Mm-hmm.
heir, was I think with the mage, it was more the fact that it affected her magic, which was basically cutting off a limb to this reader. Exactly. It
Mm-hmm.
it affected the identity of the character. It
Yeah,
fundamentally altered the identity of the character, and I didn't give that gravitas as the author. That wasn't a turn of phrase. That was a series of events, right? That's the kind of big part of the theme. Like when you read something sometimes and you're looking at it, you take a step back and you look at it and you go like, okay, but what am I doing here? This wasn't a like a scene that needs fixing. It's like across this section of the story, I'm not handling this with gravitas.
right. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's stories are a fluctuation of, things that are going to affect a larger area of the story, things that are going to affect just little moments of the story, but it's still all, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this, every story is going to have a theme. It's just that, are you
Yeah.
focused? So another thing we talked about last night was one of the people that read, there's a paragraph in the middle that was bringing in yet another aspect. And I'm just like, do we need this? Because there's so much in this scene, and there's
Mm.
so much that that you're forcing me to eat and consume
Mm.
and pay attention to. Do I also need this now? Because it's just, I think it was one step too many for it. And so, yeah, that's exactly it. It's, you have to balance that out. You have to think about where the reader is at, what they can tolerate, and be able to
I, I
deliver.
I feel like this is a good segue to talk about the importance of focusing your theme.
Actually,
So
let's take a step back before then, because I was
yeah,
going to do that a second ago, and we just kept talking about interesting stuff. Let me ask you a question.
yeah.
What is a theme?
So a theme for me is, and I like the way that I think it was one of Jed Horn's videos where he was like, it's the philosophical stakes of your story. I thought that was a great way to put it. It is the core question that your story is addressing. Is Are all actions justified? If 51% of people benefit from your actions, are evil actions justified? For example, is there such a thing as evil? Could also be a theme. Um, Tolkien's theme was the heroism of the common man. So, like, can a hero rise from the common people? That kind of thing. You can have the theme, the thematic question is the question that your story seeks to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's for me, it's the humanizing element. It's what is, people come into stories, whether they admit this or not, whether they even know this or not, people come into stories wanting to be challenged. They want to, no one wants to just read something and not be affected by it. Like, I always say this, no one who is not scared of horror movies likes horror movies. If horror movies do nothing for you, you don't like them. You don't go to them. You don't watch them. Someone's like, "Hey, we're gonna go watch the new slasher flick," and you're like, "Eh, no thanks," because it doesn't scare you. but the people that love horror movies are terrified by them. And they love that. They want that. They want to feel that fear in the safety of a theater. Even though they might not go, you know what I really want today? I want to feel afraid. They just love horror movies because they love the way, whatever experience they get out of it. Same thing with romance, same thing with adventure, same thing with whatever.
Okay, so theme. Let's talk about the importance of needing to focus your theme. So one of the videos that I watched in preparation for this put it really, really well. They were like, the overall theme originally was justice. And then when they but then they just found that the book just went everywhere. Like the story just went everywhere, as opposed to being a focused story about something in the justice topic. And so they outlined, they refined, and they went down to the topic of, is murder ever justified? Like, is it ever justified to murder somebody in cold blood? And that was a great theme, because that was a narrow, specific theme that asked a specific question. So I think it's really important to try and focus your theme around a specific question within a concept, right? A broad concept like justice or love or something like that isn't a theme. It's a subject area. You need
It's a
to,
great place to start thinking about, you know, and I really kind of want a story that deals with justice, but it's not a theme.
yeah.
So you have to give something that has some meat on it. So as you said, you know, justice has no meat on it. It's this esoteric thing.
It's too big.
Is it ever justified to murder? Ever justified to murder? Now that's a topic that has some gravitas that we can go, okay, let's get into this.
Because that asks an interesting question. And it doesn't say, is it ever justified to kill? Because the answer is obviously, in defense of others. And I mean, there's obvious, answers there. It says murder, like cold-blooded, legally defined murder. Is that ever justified? And that becomes a very interesting topic,
Yeah.
And one with a lot of meat on the bone that you can orientate the story around and ask the question of the reader.
100%.
And I think the way that author went, and I can't remember who it was, otherwise I'd specifically call out their channel, but the way that they delved into the specifics around the topic was they said that they did refine down to this theme, which is also an interesting concept, because maybe you're sitting and you're thinking, I want to write a story about love, and you don't know what 100% what you want to write about love. You just know you want to write something about love. It is worth starting to outline, or it is worth starting to write if you're a pantser, and to kind of see where the story takes you, where the majority of the story takes you, and to then refine down to the actual thematic question you want to ask.
Yeah. So the channel's called The Closer Look.
That's the one
that it came from. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been working on fixing over the last 10, 12 years as I travel around going to writers' conferences or whatever, for some reason, and I have to blame George Martin, but for some reason, a lot of people think that the statement, you got to kill your darlings, refers to you got to kill your characters. You love your characters, but you need to put them, and they don't necessarily think that it means killing, but like you got to put them in bad situations, you got to hurt them, you got to take things away from them, whatever. That statement has nothing to do with characters. So back in the day, everyone was a pantser. No one was allowed to plot because I don't know. The idea of don't plan out a really good story before you write it was bad for some reason. I don't know. I don't understand. But they did think it a weakness, and everyone was pushed to be a pantser. Everyone was pushed. No, if you're not writing stream of consciousness, if you're not creating on the fly, you're not an artist. And it's like, or you could think about creating a really good, powerful story before you start, getting into the creative mode. So what the You've Got to Kill Your Darlings meant was a lot of people who pant stories, who just are discovery writers, will get to the end of the entire manuscript and have no idea what their theme is. Like, they haven't even figured it out when they write the words "the end." And so when you're in that first draft, that second draft, and so on and so forth, once you do figure out your theme, now the hard part comes. You have to look at the scenes, and you have to ask yourself, does this scene prove or disprove my plot, my theme? And if the answer is no, you really only have a couple choices. One, you can figure out, is there a way you can tweak or rewrite or finagle that scene so that it actually does incorporate your theme? Or do you have to cut that scene? And that's where Killing Your Darlings was, because the darling was not your characters. It was the scenes you wrote because you love them. And the caveat I always add to that is, a lot of people will then go something like, oh, well, I can't cut this scene even though it doesn't have my theme because I kill Bob in this scene. And it's so important for the story that Bob dies. And that's why I always push people to understand that things are elements. So just because you killed Bob in this scene and in this way doesn't mean you can't kill him in a different scene in a different way and still have the same exact impact that it needs to be on the story. So if you cannot work that theme in there, it must be cut. And anything that's in that scene that must happen for the story just either has to happen in a different scene that replaces it, or you have to move it to, a scene before to scene after, whatever you're going to do. But that's what that means. And so that's why, like, for us, and although you are much more of a pantser than I am, you are still, especially with world building, so great at, really thinking things through, that I still think that epic fantasy is very hard to do if you're just flat out pantsing and have no idea where you're going. So, and it may be the rise of fantasy in the 50s that caused us to be more accepting of the plotter mindset.
I think that it would be hard to completely pants a multi-volume epic.
Yeah.
Like I think you need some guidelines, at least some concept of where you're going. But regardless,
So
so
somebody in the chat actually typed in a really cool thing. A wonderful theme would be impulsive versus strategy.
so impulsive versus strategy is a great start to a theme, but it's not a theme because it's not a question.
Right.
The question is, what's better, impulsive versus strategy? Or a question could be, what is worse? Or a question could be, what creates a better out? But it's just the impulse versus strategy isn't the theme yet.
Right. What are the downfalls of being too impulsive or too strategized?
Yes.
That puts meat on those bones. And that's the reason why
Yeah.
we always talk about themes needing to be questions.
Yes. The theme needs to be a question that you intend to answer through the narrative.
Yeah.
But what you don't want to do is you don't want to answer the question so clearly that the reader goes, oh, 100% this is the answer.
Hmm.
Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to evoke the question in the reader's mind and get them to think about it, to consider the work that you've put in place and to come up with their own answer. That's the concept behind the theme. But if you go like, bam, this is the answer, you run into a lot of problems because basically it's like, well, either you're going to come across as preachy or you're going to come across as um,
Obvious.
obvious. You're going to come across as cliched. Like,
Yeah.
so,
It's basically, again, what I say all the time.
mm,
Stories should challenge.
yeah.
And if you are not challenging, you're not going to have the impact that you're looking for on your audience. So someone else in the chat said, and I'm sure tongue-in-cheek wise, but theme, who is in charge here? The theme question should be esoteric enough that, and again, that's where we talk about that meat. It's esoteric enough that it's like, huh, okay. Because like, if it's a question like who is in charge here, it's, oh, Bob. End of story. Like if there's an answer to the theme, then it's probably, if there's an answer to what you think is the question of your theme, like a direct answer, it's probably not a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably like, you should you must always leave the reader wondering with like, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah.
And
that's where I was.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go the other direction is, as much as people preach about, you need to know what your theme is. You need to, focus on a theme. You have a theme with meat. It is also about going the other way as well. It's about being a little bit more vague. So just like we talked about at the beginning of this, where we have the Pied Piper that could be a couple different things. Great. It's fine. As long as they're all kind of in the same, sort of think about it like a dartboard. You're trying to say that the center. This is what you're trying to prove in your story. But as long as they're hitting somewhere near the center, they're all close enough related that the audience is still going to be impacted by your story. And that's what we want. So we want to be, we don't want to just nail the theme on the head every single scene. As in, like you said, it's preachy or it's obvious or it's cliche or it's, a million different things of, oh my God, why am I reading this? Unfortunately, that's how I feel in a lot of Stephen King books. Usually about a third of the way through, I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's going to end like this. And then it does. So, but that's a part of that. If you're a pure pantser, then you're trying to figure it out. Well, I'm also trying to figure it out as I'm reading. I'm not writing at the time. It's already been written, but I'm still trying to figure out where the story's going. And usually about the time King figures out, oh, I got a great idea, it's going to go here. A lot of his stories, not all. I mean, he's still got one of the most breathtaking pieces in, and I know it's a movie, but The Shawshank Redemption still just blows my mind of how amazingly well it's written.
As well.
Yeah. And so, but there is a lot of them that I kind of nail, and then that is the way it ends. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge Stephen King fan, because of the fact that if I can get the ending of the story a third of the way through, then why am I reading it? I've already figured it out. So you want to challenge them through that, and you want them constantly wondering about, wait a minute, am I right? Is it going? Wait, where are we going? How are we getting here? And that's the thing of why it's so important. So one of the things I teach in my theme book and classes is, yes, the question. We turn it into a question. Is it ever okay? Is murder ever justified in any situation? That's a great question. It's got a lot of meat. It's got a lot of depth. We can go a lot of different directions. In that video, he went into a courtroom. He had somebody whose wife was murdered unjustly, and justice never did anything to the killer. And so he took matters in his own hands. He killed the killer of his wife, but now he's going to jail for murder because he killed somebody. Because the character wasn't even, the main character in his little theoretical story wasn't even the guy who did the murdering. It was the prosecutor and the defense attorney. And so it was them going back and forth and struggling with it. And the jury was kind of the audience stand-in. And that's awesome. But it could have been anything. I mean, it could be The Fugitive. It could be, there's a million movies that do that exact same thing and do different angles. But having a question doesn't help me as a writer. So what I have learned is to take that question and to turn it into two opposing answers. So if I was writing that story, I would have the answer of murder is never justified for any reason. And then I would have the answer, murder is justified if the reason is valid. And then what I'd be looking at, and how I can use that now as a metric, is I would look at a scene and see what it proves. Does it prove that murder is not justified in any reason, or does it prove that murder is justified depending? And as long as every scene leans toward one of those two sides, And I also want to waffle kind of back and forth. Not that I'm going to do one and one and one and one. It's usually one and, you know, two this way and two this way and one this way and three this way. And, you know, you're going to waffle through the scenes. But as long as I can say, yeah, you know what, this scene does, and it doesn't have to prove the answer because we're not going to prove it until the climax. But as long as I'm like, no, yeah, that is actually, you know, struggling with this question and it's leaning toward this side as the answer, or it's leaning toward that side as the answer. That's how I can use it to make sure my scenes are, because if you, in the beginning, when I was like, you know, is murder justified for any reason? And I'd look at it and I was like, does this, because I'm now not focusing on it leaning one way or the other. I'm trying to see if it's answering this question in some way. And I just got lost in that. And I never could really feel like, okay, this scene is doing it. But once I broke it into the two answers, it was much easier to go, yeah, this scene is definitely pointing in the direction of no, murder is never, never, because of what's being said and what the events are and all of that. And so I do think it helps to turn those themes into answers. And then just every scene you should just lean one way. And that's much easier to kind of spot in your writing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that having opposing viewpoints is very important in your theme. I also want to mention one other thing about themes, and that is about character growth and tying it into themes, like a character growth arc. Now, a character growth arc doesn't have to specifically be the thematic growth, right? So they don't have to, a character doesn't have to specifically grow in the theme 100%. They can have their own growth arc, right? So if I think of like our Magic Fall story, we have an overarching theme there, which is a kind of esoteric question about consciousness and change and progress versus staying the same and so on. But we also have growth arcs for our characters that are about those characters. Now it has tiebacks to the theme. It has thematic impact, but it isn't that they grow in the theme. They have their own arcs and their own themes. And it's also important to bear that in mind and not, because I think it can get quite overwhelming if literally everything, including every character, is on this growth arc tied directly to the main theme.
Yeah. Well, that's understanding that the character is the one that the story's about. You
Yeah.
know, I try to push this to the people that I'm leading down this path. When you're writing in limited, which is what most people are trying to write in, either third person limited or first person, which are both limited, it is an exercise. It's the ultimate exercise in narcissism. The main character is not just the center of the world. They literally are the center of the world. Like everything revolves around them. Like literally, not figuratively. And somebody popped me for using literally too much, but I literally mean it literally this time. um, and so, you know, they're the one that are struggling with the main thematic question. It's not that other characters can't. It's just that we don't want to, since we can never mention our theme and we can never, you know, pound the reader over the head with it, we do want to be careful with muddying the waters. You know, another thing I do in my teachings and talk about why the theme needs to be throughout the story is I say, let's say we're writing a 5-scene story and we want the theme to be justice, you know, or, you know, is murder justified? And in the first opening scene, the theme is about, is murder justified in any way? And the second scene, the theme is all about loving your mother. And the third scene, the theme is all about being to work on time. And the fourth scene, the theme is all about not being greedy. And then the fifth theme, you know, the fifth theme comes back to, is murder ever justified? What is the theme of that book? I mean, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And so the reader is, since you're never going to mention any of these things, the reader is just going to be reading these scenes that are connected in a and then way. We woke up and then ate breakfast and then went to work. It's going to be connected that way, but it's not going to be connected thematically. And so since the theme is the only thing that actually impacts the reader, they're not going to understand what's impacting them. It's never going to do anything. And that's the reason why we want to be very focused on every scene is you know, through subtext, subliminally, whatever, pushing what we're trying to do. What is the message? And it can be all sorts of different ways. You know, it could be in our murder justified thing, we could have a scene where the main character is going and they've taken their beloved pet to the vet and they found out that the cat has, you know, their cat has terminal cancer. And sure, if they spend all this money and do this chemotherapy drugs on the cat will live another year, but it won't be a great life. And so
Mm,
now he has to decide, do I put the cat down and suffer through that, or do I,
mm,
you know, spend this money and all that? Like that has nothing to do with, you know, the, if this is the let's say it's the prosecutor, it has nothing to do with the dude murdering the dude who murdered his wife. Yet it does definitely have those thematic elements in it. And that's what we're
yeah,
doing in storytelling. And that's why you're looking for scenes that are pushing your thematic elements that do fit within the confines of the and then, because, you know, that would be, you know, he went to court and then went home and his cat was really, really ill. And then he went to the vet and then he found out that the cat has terminal cancer. Like, so we're still following the story, but it still ties in. It ties into the thematic element that we're playing with. And now he's struggling, like in the story, he's on the side of no, never kill anything. Absolutely wrong. I don't care what the reason is. That guy needs it. And then he's like, crap.
yeah,
Do I want my cat to suffer for the next year of its life just to make me happy that I didn't kill him? Or do I, you know, mercifully let him go on? And so, yeah, it's still a part of it. And so even though it's a completely different, it has nothing to do with the court case. So it's not that the and then has to do with exactly the and then that we're talking about. It just has to tie into that thematic element. And then you're pushing this throughout the entire thing. And maybe there's audience members out there that are like, I don't know why the cat vet scene was there. I don't understand that. But I think the majority of people will get, oh wow, he just had to struggle with doing the opposite of what he was pushing.
mm,
So, you know, just the way it is.
yeah. Yeah, I think that it is important to try and like build your theme into, you know, your stories and into the scenes and so on. But I did also just want to mention like the growth arcs and so on. And
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did I derail that? I thought we had finished that, but
I think we're good. I think we're
okay.
good. I think the most important part to remember about your themes is make it a question. Make sure you show both sides of the answer. Like, don't just, you know, show one side of the answer, show them both. And make sure that you actually drive that theme throughout the book. And I think you'll be good.
On the
Oh,
on an episode soon, because we don't have time to do it here,
yeah.
but on an episode soon, we need to do a follow-up episode for this to talk about, okay, great, but knowing this, how does that create your act one? How does that move you into act two? Because the theme is instrumental in helping you understand how to move through the story as well. Once you figure out your theme, I think it's much easier to figure out the story. Like it almost writes itself once you have these answers of where you're going with the theme. And I think it might be a cool episode to go through and
Sure, except that I find that quite often you part of the outlining process is refining the theme.
right.
Like you don't always discover your theme until you've actually
Oh,
finished
100%.
outlining. And then you're like,
100%.
oh wait, hold on. This is my actual theme.
Yeah, 100%. But then you still then use it to refine,
Yeah.
and you know, because now it'll do the things that I'm talking about how,
Mm,
you know, understanding where the character starts is on the wrong side of the theme, understanding that the inciting incident is because they're on the wrong side of the theme, understanding that, you know, the climax comes from them moving to the right side of the theme, and answering that question for the audience of which way should we go. So you need the theme, and yes, it fits much better on top of the hero's journey. This isn't a perfect, there's so many different ways to tell stories and so many different aspects of storytelling that, you know, it might not fit in a slice of life story, or, you know, a literary fiction story that's just doing some other high-end concept or something like that. But for the vast majority of, especially what me and you do, which is adventure fantasy stories, it fits really, really well as the building block to that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we should do a follow-up to kind of
Yeah,
go
we
down
can.
that path.
We can. All right. I think that, however, is a good place to end this episode on. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.